Hi everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Emily. I am the Women in Dairy coordinator, and I work for RABDF, which is the Royal Association of British Dairy Farmers. So we've been running a number of these webinars over lockdown and ever since. So this is actually going to be our final one until we're having a break over August, because everybody's quite busy. So we'll have this session this evening, and then we've got a break until we come back in September with the conference, and I'll mention that a bit more at the end. So as I say, thank you very much for signing up to join us this evening. We've got Richard Ferguson and Liz Haines, who have very kindly agreed to speak. So Richard was actually recommended to me by Holly Beckett, who did one of our first Women in Dairy webinars last year. And I spoke to Holly and I said, well, I want to do something on work-life balance and how we can be better at how we spend our time and where we put our focus. And she said, I've got just the right person. And now we have Richard with us. So Richard's background, he is a consultant that's worked with many companies, helping with workplace culture and similar things to that. So he's not a dairy farmer, he's not a farmer, but he is going to give us a really good insight tonight into what he does know about, and hopefully stretch us all a bit to think about where we're spending our time, how we're where we're putting our priorities, I guess. And then Liz is coming in with an excellent perspective as a rather busy working woman in dairy, dairy farmer, mother of two, AHDB board member, generally busy lady who does a lot of different roles in her life. So really looking forward to hearing from you both. In terms of the format this evening, Rich is going to do about 20 minutes, Liz is going to do about 20 minutes, and then we're going to throw you all into a few little breakout rooms to have a quick chat about what you'd like to take away from the evening and how you're going to challenge yourself going forward. So we'll do that at the end for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A. So if anyone's got any questions as we go through, if you can put them in the chat box, and then we'll address all of those at the end. And I've put everybody on mute just for ease so that everybody can hear what's going on. Any questions, as I say, going through, pop them in the chat box. But I think that's probably all the waffle I need to start with. So I'm going to hand you over to Rich.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks, Emily. Evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come along. I'm just trying to sort my slides out so you can see them at the same time. I was a farmer, and I have aspirations to be a farmer. I'm a frustrated farmer at heart, I think. I had 5 sheep once. I used to have chickens, and I had bees for a long time, but I did have 5 sheep once. There's more effort to land 5 sheep than I would have out of a flock of 150, I think. But so some experience of ag, but that's not what I'm here to talk about this evening at all. So, topic of my brief chat and some of the stuff that I want to impart was when life or work or both gets in the way. And I guess I've got a couple of outcomes that I'd love to try and achieve in our short time together. So one is just a chance to maybe hopefully give you something that's different. So that's the yellow arrow going against what you know and what you've always seen and what you've always done. So it would be lovely if at the end of this there was something in there that maybe was just a different insight, a different view, and makes you think a little differently, a different perspective, which is what was the title. And the second is that you've got a bit of energy or excitement or enthusiasm even to attempt to do something different. Learning, I think the definition is a change in experience brought about by a change in behaviour brought about by an experience. And if we don't do anything differently, then we haven't learned anything. So that was sort of the idea about trying to land on something small and tiny that you might take away and do something. So that's what I would love for you to be able to take away. And hopefully will give you at least some food for thought. A couple of quotes that I found and saw when I was doing this. don't make time to create the life you want, you're going to be forced to spend a lot of time dealing with a life you don't want. And I'm sure there's lots of parts of your life that you may enjoy, you may not enjoy. But this idea of taking time, having a plan. If you don't have your own plan, you end up as part of somebody else's plan, and they haven't written their plan for you. So part of the other work I do around SatNav for Life and helping coaching people is to help folk think through and build their own sort of plan. I find that most folks spend more time planning a trip to Tesco's than they do their lives, and it's a real shame in a way. So I think that was just an interesting quote. And there was a second one, which is, balance isn't something that you find, it's something that you create. And for me, this sits at the heart almost of what I believe or offer up to be, one of the challenges of this idea of work-life balance. It's one of those phrases that gets bandied around. I've been hearing it, using it, and party to it for years and years and years, as I'm sure you have, in the corporate world that I work in, as well as, with friends and, hockey mates who on the work-life balance is out of kilter and all this sort of stuff. So I think it's, it's a challenge that we all face in different ways. And I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts as to how we might think about it, perhaps a little bit more differently, if that makes sense. So I've got 3 underpinning principles. I sort of made this up a little bit, but I think it's valid. And the first one, maybe almost the most important, which is balance is something only you can define for you. When Emily and Liz and I were just chatting before you folk came on board, they were citing an example, a friend or somebody else that had been part of this process or part of the group, who gets up at 5, does a workout, bakes some scones, does a brilliant thing with the children, sorts out a wonderful, just millions of things, sorts the horses out. And I think in this day and age of social media, everybody on Facebook is happier, having a busier, more successful life, having more fun, got happier children, tidier houses, whatever it might be. All of the things that we all, at some stage kind of worry about, perhaps. I think the exposure to things like Facebook, like Twitter, whatever, by Instagram, and there's so much out there that allows us or enables us to feel that everybody else has got it right and I'm the one that's missing out, I'm the one that's out of balance. And I think that's a real shame, because this lady getting up at 5 and doing all of that sort of stuff, that might not be for you. It worked for her, it was balanced for her. For other people, it'd be massively out of kilter. And it changes over time. So, what was balanced when you were sort of in your early 20s, and that becomes very different when you're older, or you have a family, or different work. So I think first point, I guess, is when you, or if you, and you might not, there might be folk in the audience, you folk out there that are perfectly in balance and feel really happy about this, and hopefully share some of that. But when we pause to think, maybe I've got the balance wrong, on whose terms? What are you comparing yourself against to feel like that's out of balance? And if it's because you're not achieving stuff and you're not getting some of the things that you want to get done, and I'll move to the second point in a minute, then that's cool. But if it's because I just don't seem to be getting as much done as my neighbour, or the ladies at the book club, or the blokes at the hockey club, if they all seem to be doing more than I am and better careers, therefore I'm out of balance, then, I think that's probably a chance to pause and say, do you know what, that's not your balance. What's your balance? So that was kind of the first principle. Second is, we pay attention, we only have a small attention span, and I have probably smaller than most, but what we pay attention to is what is important to you, by definition. And the challenge or the opportunity, I think, in this space around balance is about you defining your priorities and being very clear. And when people talk about being out of balance, it's because they are trying to juggle a whole heap of things. And this concept of multitasking is fundamentally flawed, because you don't do anything well, you do 7 or 6 or 4 or 5 things badly. So in my view, humble opinion, being really clear about what is important allows you to find ways of carving time. And when I talk about priorities, you know, I do a lot of strategic work with large organizations, and we do this thing around, you know, setting strategic priorities. And if there's any more than 3 or 4, 5 at the very most, then they're not strategic. You know, you can't organizationally and or personally focus on, I don't think, more than 3 or 4 really important things if they are important. So I don't know how many of you are clear, have set, you know, goals, priorities, plans, aspirations, bucket lists, however you describe it. This level of intentionality, which I know is a bit of an overused phrase, but I think it's really important. If we're intentional, then we've got a better chance of making better decisions about how we spend our time, and it's our time on the things that matter to us. And I go back to, you know, if you haven't got a plan, you end up as part of somebody else's plan. So phone calls, you know, that's not your agenda, that's somebody ringing you. Emails, you know, so much that interferes in our world that may or may not be important to us. Underpinning the priorities thing, one thing that's really helped me, and I spend a lot of time now talking about values, so I'm really clear about my values, and one of the exercises I do with people that I coach is a values exercise where I help people tease out their values, because if values are by definition things that are very important, then how are we managing and organizing our lives to fit around our values? So for me, it's freedom, love, health, personal growth and adventure. And freedom is really important. It's why I set up Killy Consulting, this business. So it's just me, and you know, it allows me to do stuff. So again, you know, how clear are you about your values? And the build on that, I guess, is purpose. I think it was Confucius that said, if you live a life on purpose, you don't do a day's work in your life. And I know I've got lots of friends that are farmers, lots of friends in the ag industry, and there is something about farming being a way of life. You certainly don't do it for the money at times. And so, you know, is that your purpose? And so therefore, how do you then reconcile what's important? And then that last little picture is this point about intentionality. So, you know, not a right answer, but I know that if the clearer you are about why you exist, what's important to you, you've got a better chance of making more judicious decisions about how you spend your time. And it comes back to that choice about how you spend your time. And the last of the principle is about building habits. I have an absolutely automatic blueberry muffin habit. Go to Costa, order a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden a blueberry muffin seems to appear on the counter. You know, we've got lots of habits that are really helpful. Brushing our teeth is probably a great example. You don't even think about that, and we spend an awful lot of time in our lives doing that. So how can you automate some of the really important stuff? So therefore you're not juggling, you're not having to prioritize, you're not finding different or new ways of doing things, because some of this, whether it be a planning habit, whether it be an exercise habit, whether it be a reading habit, whether it be a taking time out for me, away from busy children, busy farm, husbands, partners, whatever it might be. So I don't know where your habits are, where you would define good habits or not so good habits, but the opportunity to create great habits, I think, is again really powerful. The brain processes so much subconsciously. 90% of what goes on, an input that we receive, is processed subconsciously. There's only 10% which is conscious. So how do you tap into that huge productivity pot, which is the subconscious, and how do you find ways of thinking about stuff that you'd like to do more of or less of, and maybe the opportunity of shaping habits. Next little slide, and probably the one more after this, just to quickly share, is a slide I've been using for over 20 years with organizations, but it applies absolutely pertinently to us in our own lives. And it says, look, there's 3 levels of work, a hierarchy of work that we get involved in. There's operational stuff, which is just day to day, getting the job done. You know, it might be milking cows, it might be feeding cows, it might be walking the dog, it might be feeding the children. It's just stuff that is part of what we've got to do through the day. There's a leadership role, you know, in organizations and on farms with staff and people, but there's also a personal leadership role. You know, we've got our own lives, we're all leaders of our own lives and our own destinies. And then there's a strategic piece of work or area that we can get to spend time in. And I don't know how well balanced. So I do this in organizations, and if you think about, you know, in teams, and it's always out of kilter because there's an operational bias, there's a gravity to operational work. It's easy. It's more, you know, it's easier to do some emails, answer the phone, than to step back and think. And you can apply this to anything. I think about my dogs. I've got a wire-red Vizsla and a German wire pointer. They're gun dogs that I work because I shoot. And I can think about how much time do I spend just walking them, operational activity, once in the morning, once in the evening, how much time am I developing them and me by training them in terms of that leadership box, and how much time am I spending thinking about, you know, their weaknesses, their strengths, where I want them to be, you know, what my aspirations for them in the future. And I'm not trying to over-egg it, but it's you know, hopefully it just demonstrates. It's the same with children, you know, feeding them, as opposed to maybe taking a leadership role, which is to say, how do I teach them to put the dishes in the dishwasher, or, you know, how do I begin to encourage them to grow and learn so I don't have to do stuff for them? That's leadership thinking. It's just easier often just to do it yourself and do it for them. So I share those two examples by way of saying this isn't just applying to work in terms of corporate world. This is, you know, how are you spending your time planning and thinking? And if I had lots more time, there's loads more I could share with you, but ultimately it comes back down to, if you're clear about your priorities, if you're clear about the things that you want to get done, then the challenge is to spend the time, you know, planning it. And it isn't, sometimes it can be more complicated, but, you know, I don't know how many of us, you know, think about how we want to spend the week and what we want to achieve in the week. And that old adage, you know, I run the week or the week runs me. You know, you get to Friday or whatever day is the end of your week, and oh my God, I'm here again. How did that happen? You know, what did I get done, and what did I achieve? So for me, this is something around planning and having the space and time to do that in a way that worked for you. But it comes back to the principles. You know, you work out where balance means for you, be clear about what's important. How do I find a way of automating it? And the last thing I just want to share is this slide, which I'm sure folk have seen before. It's a Stephen Covey thing originally, I think. But, you know, how much time are you spending where you can make a difference, which is that circle of control. I know we're all great talking about the weather. I came on and talked immediately with Liz and Emily when I started, because we're great at doing it, way out of our comfort zone. And as farmers, you know, in ag, it's massively influential, and you spend huge amounts of time thinking about it and worrying about it, quite rightly. And we can manipulate or manage and try and influence what we can do about it, but there's so much that we can't influence and is out of our control. So that was just the last thing I'd want to share with you, really, is, you know, if you think about when you're out of balance, is it because you are spending time on stuff that is out of your control, worrying about things, faffing around things? I don't know, I certainly do so at times. So I'll pause there. There's loads more, and there's a heap of stuff around. That's those 5 leadership characteristics from that model, and there's loads of stuff that I could share around that, but again, we haven't particularly got time. But I really just wanted to share those small number of slides, and if I come back to that thing around the principles, I think, you know, that would be the lasting thing I'd leave with you. So I'll pause there, I'll stop sharing. There may or may not be some questions. You can pick that up as you get into your little groups, but I'll hand over to Liz, if that's okay, and just see where that takes us.
Great, thanks, Richard. Did anyone want to ask any questions before I jump in?
Sorry, I keep looking at 2 screens.
No questions. No. Right.
You carry on, Liz, and then we'll take the questions at the end, if that's okay.
Cool. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Liz Haines. Some of you might have met me before or seen me when I spoke at the Women in Dairy conference a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago now. So I'm a dairy farmer with my husband in Staffordshire. We moved last year to a new tenancy, so it's been a bit of a hectic year for us with everything that's been going on the farm as well as in life generally. My background isn't in farming. I studied English and I used to work in book publishing, what feels like a very long time ago. You know, normal office job, 9 to 5, every weekend off, 28 days holiday a year. And ironically, I left that to go farming with my husband because I thought it would give me better work-life balance. And I do often chuckle about that, really. But, you know, overall, I think it was the right decision because at least now I'm in control of my own time, and although, you know, we do work hard and we are very busy, we manage it ourselves, and that works for us, really. So I'll just go back a bit further into my story, really. So used to work in book publishing in London, decided that didn't want to live in London for my whole life, didn't want to bring up children there. I was certainly never going to persuade my husband to live there, so I had to make a change. So I moved to Dorset, where he was working at the time, and started making a plan to get into farming. Did an evening course in farm records and accounts, started off by just rearing calves on the weekend, and helping out in the milking parlour and that kind of thing, before progressing to getting into a joint venture in Shropshire, and going full-time farming, which was probably a few of the busiest years of my life then. But even now I look back and think, at the time I felt like I was extremely busy, working 14 hours a day, milking and doing the calves and doing all the paperwork and setting up this new business. But to be honest, now compared to juggling family and everything, it was actually pretty easy. But you'll understand this kind of stuff because you've all been there as well, really. And then so last year, well, the end of 2019, we left the contract farming thing that we were doing in Shropshire well, originally the plan was to move to Cornwall, and that fell through at the 11th hour. So that was a pretty stressful time. And we ended up moving in with my in-laws for a few months during the first lockdown, which in some ways was fantastic. Having that family support during lockdown. They live on a small holding, so it was great having entertainment for the kids. They've got a pony there and chickens and things like that. But on the other hand, living with your family and in the same house for weeks on end while you're also trying to plan your next business move and do all those kind of things can be intense at times, and obviously in lockdown conditions and everything. So but we managed to get a tenancy in Staffordshire in April of last year. That's a joint venture with a couple of business partners that we've got. We're very lucky that that kind of fell into place at the right time for us, and we spent most of last year just getting that all set up, really. We built a milking parlour, we've bought a herd of cows from our landlord, sold that herd of cows, been bringing cows in, getting tracks and water and fencing set up on the farm. I say we, it's not me who's actually been like sat on a digger doing the fences or any of that kind of thing. I've been more doing the paperwork side of things, to be fair, and helping out ad hoc with all the crazy things that go on in that kind of process, really. So yeah, it's definitely been an intense year. So yeah, that's me. I've got 2 sons, 5 and 3. So that's a big part of the juggle, as well as my other commitments with HDB. So I've been a board member with HDB for a couple of years now. That's normally 2 days a month commitment, probably more before lockdown, whereas during coronavirus, that's all moved to being very online based, which that's been challenging, to be honest. It's much better to be able to get out there and see people face to face, but it has made the juggling side of that kind of easier because I can do it from home. I can just do it from a computer. But like everyone else, we've all had those incidents when you've got a child in the background shouting and wanting snacks or all those kind of things. So that, and then I also do my Farmers Weekly column, and I'm treasurer of our discussion group. So plenty of things going on. But that said, to be honest, I sometimes feel guilty talking to people at things like this, because I'm sure there are plenty of people here who do more farm work than I do. The first thing anyone from outside of farming says to me is, oh, you must work very long hours, you must get up very early in the morning. And it's like, well, no, actually, my husband is the one who gets up at 4:30 every morning. I do milk every other weekend with him, but on Monday to Friday, it's not me who is doing the milking. So I'm very lucky in that sense that we do have a team of staff, and I'm able to, balance the workload with them, really. So yeah, I mean, what does a week in my life look like then? Well, would I describe it as balanced? I don't know, last week I was on holiday, and this week we've been absolutely flat out. So you could call that really balanced, or you could just call it like poor planning. So this week we've had the first face-to-face board meeting for HDB in ages, had a TB test, whole herd TB test, which we'll be reading tomorrow. So cross your fingers for me. And then, I've milked this afternoon so that my husband can take the kids to get their hair cut, as well as, juggling the usual kind of paperwork side of things. If I'd have as well as, you know, doing this tonight and writing my column was due on Wednesday as well, which as usual I left to the last minute to do. So, you know, if I'd have been a more kind of organized and balanced person, perhaps I'd have prepped a bit better last week while I was on holiday. But I think that's kind of a key message I want to say this evening. I'm not sitting here to kind of present myself as an example of someone who's really organized and balanced. To be honest, I am someone who's a bit more last minute, who does kind of wing it. I tend to need the pressure of a deadline to, you know, snap me into action. Otherwise, I do tend to procrastinate. I make a lot of lists. I love ticking things off a list. I sometimes even add things that I've already done to the list and then tick them off because I really enjoy that feeling. But I'm not someone who like lives by my smartphone or has extensive like reminders on my phone to do things, or you know, I make my lists and I get by, but to me, to be honest, that's kind of good enough. I feel like I'm, you know, just about achieving the things I need to. Yeah, I do get stressed at times, like I'm sure we all do, but I do feel like I'm kind of working in the right direction, really. You know, I'd love to have more time to exercise or to eat healthier, see my friends a bit more, but, you know, it's all a work in progress, basically. What are the things that I think we do well? I'm really lucky that we do have a team of staff on our farm. It's not just me and my husband. And so we are disciplined about having every other weekend off. And unless it's kind of an emergency, we try not to work on that weekend unless we've been kind of scheduled to do a specific task. And I guess because I've come from that not farming background, to me, I see those weekends as quite a sacred thing, and you know, I need those weekends always to look forward to kind of get through the other stuff that I've got to do. And so we're disciplined at sticking to that, really. You know, we do make time for holidays as well, so we've had, you know, a week off last week, and I think that's really important as well, to schedule time to do that and to set the expectation with the team of when you'll be away, and then to stick to it, really. And yeah, you'll come back and things might not be 100% how you'd want them to be, or you know, sometimes things go wrong, but it can all be managed. And I just think it's really important to make that time, basically. I think overall we do have goals, like Richard mentioned. Nick and I have done some sort of goal setting courses in the past, both with HDB and also with Linnea Ryan as a consultant that some of you might have heard of, a Kiwi lady. We did a kind of 2-3 day course in Ireland a few years ago, where we kind of sat down and did a strategic plan for the business and for our personal lives. And although I probably am guilty of that thing, when you know, you go away on the course, you make a big plan, you feel really invigorated, you've got, you know, we drew like a great big picture that was kind of like our life plan. And then you come home and everything else kind of carries on, and a few months later you've kind of not re-looked at it. But I still think that was a really valuable exercise, and although we probably don't look at it as frequently as we should, it is there in the back of my mind, and we do think about it. And you know, if you're having a really stressful day or a hard period of time, it's always good to go back in your mind to that kind of bigger picture goal as to why you're doing it. And for us, it's not something elaborate either, those goals. It's just about, you know, building a business for the future that's going to give us security and be able to have free time to spend on our hobbies and with our families, and to, you know, be able to give our kids a good education. Those are the kind of things that were in that strategic plan for us. It's nothing kind of wacky, but you know, when you are having a bit of a rough time, to say, oh, actually, you know, nothing's gone that badly wrong, and in my kind of big picture goal, am I, you know, closer or further away than I was 6 months ago to that big picture goal? You know, that's a good thing to do, really. But the only thing I would say about those kind of goal setting exercises is sometimes you can spend your life kind of too focused in the future and not actually just enjoying what's happening day to day, and saying, oh, well, once I've done this, everything will be great, or, you know, once carving is out of the way, it'll be better, or, you know, once the kids have all gone to primary school, you know, I'll have more time to do things, or and the risk is that you just don't actually enjoy the day to day enough. And I think that that's a key part of balance, actually, is, you know, as farmers, our work is our life, and so you've got to find a way to find enjoyment in that, rather than always be trying to find some kind of artificial balance that's never really going to be there. I don't know if that kind of makes sense really, but yeah, sorry, I'm just flipping my notes page. So yeah, for me, it's about trying to snatch the little moments when you can, really, instead of setting myself kind of unrealistic expectations of, you know, I'd love to go on a fortnight long holiday, but at the moment where the business is, we just can't do that. So, you know, this summer, if I manage to have a night away with my friends for one night, that will be really great, and I'll enjoy that, and I'll, you know, savor that almost. Or at the moment, every Friday, I go to a friend's farm and we do yoga together and go for a walk with the dogs. And that's my little thing in the week, basically, to have that couple of hours. Or, you know, just going out for a walk with a friend, or, you know, taking the kids to the pub for tea as a treat. It's just savoring those little things. And the good thing is about the farm is that it does give us more flexibility than we sometimes think. You know, that is why I left my office job, because I couldn't say, oh, I'm just going to actually, you know, it's a beautiful day and we've done most of the work, so I'm just going to go home today actually and spend some time with my kids. Whereas on the farm, we can do that sometimes, not all the time, but so yeah, it's just about enjoying the things that you can, really, I think. And it doesn't have to be equal to be balanced. That's the other thing. You know, my husband would pretty happily work every day of the year, to be honest, because he just loves it. And if that's what works for you, and if you genuinely really enjoy the working, then don't feel guilty about that, really. You know, I'm not that person. I wouldn't want to just work all the time on the farm, because I've got lots of other things that interest me. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I started being involved with HDB, because I wanted to, you know, meet other people and get off the farm and use my brain in a different way, I guess. But you've got to do what works for you, basically. And yeah, enjoy what you do and find the little wins when you can, basically. That's my kind of take home message, I guess. So yeah.
Thanks, Liz.